I just finished recording the first couple of tracks for each of the songs on an upcoming EP, and I've done all of the recording using this Tascam 424 Mark II Portastudio. It's a great device, one I've used many times before, but it's been a while. I've spent the better part of the last 8 months using Tascam's Model 12, which is a pretty sophisticated digital Portastudio, etc. And for funsies, I did my last session using the DP6, which is their smallest and cheapest Portastudio. But both of those are really niche devices that are like cashing in on the reputation of these original 424 Portastudios. Devices that helped make home recording really possible for regular people like us. But that was long ago, like in an era when people wondered whether personal computers were a fad. And though this remains a very usable device, I have been reminded in a few different ways of what it's like to work with a device like this, as compared to the digital stuff I've been using recently. And in case any of you are interested in going truly DAW-less, I thought I'd share some observations. The first, and this is relatively minor, but using a device like this slows down your process in somewhat unexpected ways. At least they'll be unexpected if you're used to working with a digital device or, God forbid, in a DAW. Because little things like hitting rewind and waiting for the tape to reach wherever you want it to reach, that takes time, and it's not really precise, so there's always a little bit of lost time locating exactly where you want to be. Minor quibbles in my mind, but it could be important to those of you who are used to a rapid-fire key command workflow. Number two, if you're recording to tape, you actually have to be mindful of the signal-to-noise ratio. That's something that people talk about in the world of digital recording, but it's kind of a different animal than what people dealt with in analog recording, especially when recording to cassette. I've heard the little magnetic whatevers in tape described almost as like pixels in an image, and compared to like 2-inch tape, there's just not many pixels there. The quantity and nature of those pixels, so to speak, results in a lot of sonic artifacts that are commonly known as tape hiss. They are there all the time when you are recording to tape. It's something you're going to have to either fight with Dolby or DBX or some other noise reduction technology, or just live with. And if you decide to live with it, the level at which you record becomes very important. To put it simply, if you record a loud signal, then on playback, the noise on that particular track will be less noticeable compared to the volume of whatever you intended to record. That process of recording hot wasn't really as common, I think, as people make it out to be, because there are downsides to recording hot, as I'm about to talk about. But it is something you keep in mind, and honestly something that I wasn't thinking about that much when recording to my digital devices, because I knew that if I needed to do like giant boosts to a quiet signal, it just wasn't gonna matter that much, because that won't introduce or magnify excess noise. I'm not using DBX on this session, so the noise is just always there, kind of like anxiety. I can make it less noticeable by recording a hot signal, but I have to be careful, and I wasn't careful early in this session, because I set the levels so that the quiet sections of guitar would be approaching +6, and then the loud sections, I just thought, the tape is gonna make that sound all gooey and mojo-y. Wrong. This is what an adequate recording sounds like. That's not. Listen to that. Listen how much there is. It made it distort a lot, and honestly, it sounded like shit. And that was a problem on this project, because on every single song, there are sections with a really sort of quiet acoustic part, and then sections with a really intense, loud acoustic part. And I had to massage the levels of each of those sections in order to make them not distort, but also sound like right next to each other. It was a process and not especially fun. I sort of erred on the side of the quiet sections being slightly quiet, like potentially introducing more noise, but fuck it. I'd rather have that than have the loud sections blast in with tons of distortion or sound like they're being ducked by the volume fader when I play it back. These are just the kinds of compromises that we have to make. In addition to tape hiss, you may have heard about other artifacts of recording to cassette tape like wow and flutter. And in my experience, it's pretty rare to encounter these when you're using new or new old stock tapes and machines that are in good working order. But even today in this session, some weird things happened. And I will just throw out there that in general, more weird things seem to happen in my cassette sessions than in my digital sessions. Most of those weird things are not permanent. They can be fixed by just re-recording the part where there's an issue or even just the section where there's an issue. But there are some weird things like issues with the tape itself that are not going to be cured by further takes. You should have to go into a session aware of that and develop a habit of actually like listening back to the things that you've recorded to see if they're problem sections that need to be troubleshot or just trashed. Speaking of troubleshooting, as part of an ordinary session with an old cassette Portastudio, I recommend that you do a little bit of maintenance, mostly to the record and playback heads that are in here. It's a good idea to clean them, and it's relatively easy to do so. All you need is a Q-tip and some isopropyl alcohol. I think you can get 99%, but 91% works fine and is cheap and easy to find. The cleaning process is actually really easy, and it's a good idea to do it at the end of a session, so I'm going to show it to you right now. You open the little door, remove your cassette, and then you find the heads. In my device, they are right here and right here. I take my little Q-tip and dip it into the alcohol, and then I go in and just gently rub the alcohol dipped Q-tip onto the face of these heads. It's also kind of a good idea to clean this little spindle thingy over here. It moves all the time, so you can just rest the alcoholed Q-tip against it. That is more often dirty, but no real issues this time. And that's it. The alcohol dries super quickly, so just give it a few seconds and you can get back to work. Or in my case, close up shop. Now, all this cleaning and rewinding may really convince you that insight number one about speed of your process is a significant factor when using one of these devices. I was really focused on efficiency today because I started recording not just one, but 5 different songs. And I don't want this process to take 5 times as long as one of my ordinary song projects. So I followed a piece of advice that I remember hearing somewhere on YouTube once upon a time. Batch your processes, meaning that if you have a task or process that you're going to be repeating multiple times, try to go ahead and do all of those times together when you've got all of your tools available in place and you're in the mindset of doing that process. You're not having to try to shift focus or get different gear or do other things that might make your process a normal amount of inefficient, but an amount that can be troublesome in a session like this. I've batched my processes by sort of deciding that there are particular instruments that are going to be on all 5 of these songs and recording those instruments / parts for each of the songs at the same time. Today I was focused on 2 parts. The first was acoustic guitar, which I actually recorded to the 424 from my laptop, which had digital files that I once recorded with this Zoom at a random Airbnb in Athens, Georgia. The time has come to use those files, and they have been recorded into this device. You might think that it'd be super fast and easy to take digital recordings and just print them to tape. Actually, it wasn't for some of the reasons I've already discussed. But I finally got there, and then I thought I would just take a few minutes to set up the gear to record cajon, and then I ended up actually recording all the cajon, but actually I think the setup part is what was most important. I plugged the inputs I wanted to use into tracks 1 and 2, grabbed a blank tape that is different from the tapes to which I'll be doing the real recording, but that's the same brand and type. And then I did a bunch of test recordings, messing with the volumes of the different tracks and trying to introduce some effects in the line running from the piezo pickup inside of this cajon, diddling with some EQ, blah, 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 with the ultimate goal of having an arrangement of mic and DI and all the stuff in these channel strips that could then be bussed and printed down to one track, and for me to know that what ended up on that one track was going to be a good sound. It took a lot of trial and error, but I ended up with the settings that are sitting there right now. And I knew I liked the sound in the exact medium that I was going to be using, so I left it I didn't mess with it. All I did is remove my test tape from the 424, put the real tape in, bust the inputs to track 2 where I wanted them to land, and started recording. I did not touch a mic or a level or EQ or anything after that. All I did is recorded cajon parts. And despite the fact that I'm a mediocre cajon player, that process was so efficient because I got to focus on one specific activity, actually playing the cajon. Further. So now, in a matter of a couple of hours, I have the basic ingredients of all 5 of these songs. And it's late, and I'm tired and sweaty as hell, but I feel like I've accomplished a lot, in spite of the limitations that I faced and that you must face when using a device like this. There have been a lot of discouraging words in this video, but let me say that I still own this, and I'm using it today, tonight, in this project for a reason. I find it overall very easy to use, and I really like the workflow and the results when I do use it. And I have to admit, it's been really nice to break it out and get back into real DAW-less recording. If you've made it this far, let me know what you think in the comments, but otherwise, thank you so much for your time. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you around.